Greetings, YouTube. Back in June, Soda Lightsaber asked me what I thought America would look like in the Mad Max Fury Road version of the post-apocalypse. So, we're going to have to throw a little reality in here for me to do this. First of all, the oceans aren't gone. That was dumb. It was the only really dumb thing in the Fury Road setting, was the fact that they, for some silly reason, have decided that the oceans have evaporated. Now, it's implied in the film, but in the video game, which I've been watching Sloshworks play, it's implicit. There are like a lighthouse in a desert, and ships everywhere, and a whale carcass, or the bones of a whale. So you're driving around the areas where these places used to be. So it's explicitly a world without oceans, or oceans that have receded to the point where the coasts are now deserts. That isn't going to happen. Even if we were to launch every single nuclear device on the planet, and every single nuclear device were to detonate in the oceans, it would not evaporate the oceans. Period. It can't happen. The oceans are gone. This is a lifeless rock orbiting the Earth, orbiting the sun. Okay, you'd have to knock the planet out of orbit towards the sun to burn all the oceans off. And overcoming that level of angular momentum would probably tear the planet into little pieces. The Earth would now be a new asteroid belt orbiting the sun. So we're going to forget the stupidity of that. So, and we're also going to realize that Australia, where the film is set, lots of that place are desert already. So the degree of required warfare of nuclear exchange to get them to be a little drier, as they're presented in the film, is slight. So we're going to say it's a limited nuclear exchange. And we're going to ignore the fact that no one in the Mad Max universe, Fury Road universe, has been smart enough to move to the coast, which is where you would live. And Australia has lots of coasts, much of it which would never be touched by even a full nuclear exchange, let alone a limited nuclear exchange. So in America, we're going to have some major infrastructure will be gone. So we'll say most of the we'll say half the major cities are gone. And they're probably going to be the west and east coast. They're going to be sections which will be uninhabitable because of the fact that that's where some of our major cities are, like L.A. and New York, Washington D.C., probably most of Florida, things like that. And if it's going to be a slightly warmer world, we're going to assume that the sea level's risen up. So lots of Florida's gone. We're going to lose the bayous are going to reach further inland, things like that. So we're looking at a world with more aberrant weather than we have now. But because it's in the United States, a lot of that aberrant weather, it's still going to be moisture. So it's not going to be an arid wasteland in America. There is no way to get an arid wasteland in America unless, as I pointed out, you've pushed the planet to the point where it will not support life any longer. And the reality is, you're going to ratchet back the technological level to the 19th century. But remember, the British Empire controlled the entire planet in the 19th century, politically. And they territorially controlled a whole lot of it in the 19th century. They had troops on the ground, navies in the bays, in the oceans, in the 19th century, that were capable of extending their reach everywhere. So 19th century technology isn't that far off from what we have now. And electricity is not going to end. It just isn't. There's wind. There's solar. The hydro plants are still going to be on. Each smaller ones will still function. Lots and lots of places are still going to be functioning at an early, if not late, 20th century level of technology. And the bounce back is going to be rapid. As I've pointed out many times in post-apocalyptic settings, the only reason we allow a post-apocalyptic setting 100 to 150 years, or how long it is after a war, is because we like it. And Mad Max Fury Road takes place within Max's lifetime. And so in the film, it can't have been 20 years since the war. And director said it was 40 years from the war, and that's not possible. Max would be dead. He cannot live that long. Survival situations require a lot more wear and tear on a human body. You don't live as long. So Max would have to be at 30, 35 at the beginning of the war, and you jump that 20 years ahead, he'd be 55. That's really old in that kind of situation. That's a hard life, and Max is not 55 depicted in that film. He's 35 depicted in that film, or 40. So the time scales and everything, they're all off. So even if you push it up to the maximum, 40 years since the war, you've already got recovery time. It is no longer a post-apocalyptic setting. It's just it's the era after the war. And people are recovering, institutions are being reestablished, and remember, the United States government is not going to go away. State governments are going to keep functioning. In a lot of places, they're going to be untouched by nuclear missiles. For example, Vermont will probably be missed completely. Upper state New York, completely. A lot of the states along the Canadian border aren't ever going to get, nothing's going to get near them. There are huge sections of the Midwest which are going to be untouched, because they're untouched now. There's nothing out there to target. Particularly, this is going to be a limited nuclear exchange. So, it's not going to be what the film depicts. Now, if you want to have what the film depicts in America, okay, you can do that. But now you're in total speculation, you're just writing science fantasy, and you do what you want to. At that point, you've thrown out any kind of logic, because the only way I can interpret Fury Road, and I love that movie, is as folklore. This is a fable of Mad Max's life. This is not a document of Mad Max's life. It is a fable. It is John Henry. It is Baron Munchausen. It is Paul Bunyan. Okay? These are myths that have been spoken about Mad Max to the point where they've been ingrained into a society. A society that's cohesive enough to pass these myths on from place to place. So you're talking about a society that is completely recovered from the war and is at 20th century level technology once again. So if you want Mad Max Fury Road in America, go for it. You can do that. There's nothing stopping you. Just like I've run Gamma World many times and had it wild and wacky with mutant talking plants and psychic powers and superhero style mutation, as opposed to what real mutations are, which are deadly, which stunt you and sterilize you and cripple you and warp you and maim you. That's how real mutations work when they're caused by toxic chemicals and bombs and things. You don't get superpowers. You don't get the Marvel Universe, and that's what most post-apocalyptic settings are. They're the Marvel Universe. Mad Max is a far more toned-down version of this, Fury Road, but it's still pulp. It's not the real world, and the real-world standards essentially cannot be applied to the Mad Max Fury Road universe. And so since I can't apply them to the actual film or the game, then I can't really apply them to the same standards in America in the Fury Road universe. You do what you want for that setting. You have it be wild and wacky. You have it, and you decide if it's 10 or 20 or 50 years after the war, and you have the people that were alive at the war still alive and functioning, because that's what you want. Time is plastic for you. Technology is plastic. Mutations are plastic. It's all plastic. It can all be stretched and molded as you've seen fit. And there's nothing wrong with that at all, because that's what you want to do. But I don't like, from a personal point of view, I don't like the directly after the war scenarios, because the reality is they're ugly. The ugliness you see in the Mad Max Fury Road film. I prefer the wild, wacky, science fantasy Gamma World rebuilding from the wastelands with Marvel superheroes wandering around, discovering things in a Thunder the Barbarian setting. That's what's fun for me. It makes no sense at all. It's fairy tales with the serial numbers scraped off. Just like Star Wars is a fantasy dragons and knights story with the serial numbers scraped off and with a new coat of paint. So if you want Mad Max Fury Road in the US, go for it. There's lots of resources out there for that. Any decent post-apocalyptic module or adventure or resource book can probably give you an endless series of scenarios, just like, you know, and television series, movies, things like that. But I can't do that. I can't give you America in the Fury Road setting, because America in the Fury Road setting would again have to be a fable. And it's your fable, not mine. I couldn't run Mad Max Fury Road in a campaign setting. It isn't something I want to run. Because I would never be able to turn off the logic circuit in my brain, because it's too closely linked to our time. I need to separate, I need to divorce it enough and place it into that wild, wacky game world setting, and then I have no problem. And even then I want a level of internal consistency that some people would probably find frustrating. Because I need that internal consistency. It's what I enjoy, it's what I like, it's what I expect from my fiction. And if you send me want me to sit back and watch a fable, I'll watch a fable. You want me to write a fable? I can write you a fable. But I can't run a fable. It is just not my vibe. Even when I run fantasy games, I don't run fables. I run worlds that have consistent rules for everybody. Good guys and bad guys. And that's the way I like to run. So, I don't know if I can answer this question. How would I run? What would Fury Road look like in America? Fury Road's a fable. It isn't going to look like the thing that I think it looks like. You're going to need to write that fable for yourself. Don't get me wrong, I think that Mad Max Fury Road is one of the best action films of the last 20 years, the best post-apocalyptic action film ever made, and the best feminist action film ever made. But it's a fable. And no matter how much I try, I can't make any sense out of it when I apply logic to it. And that's what I'm being asked to do. To create the setting in America that was depicted in Fury Road. And then I'm trying to fit logic on it, and it just won't work. So, there you have it. I've rambled on long enough, and worn my silly helmet. Which is still really heavy. I'm not really... This is going to be not fun to wear all night long for Halloween, but that's life. So, tell me, could you run Mad Max Fury Road in America? And what would you do? Would it look like Fallout 3 New Vegas? Okay, would it look like Wasteland 2? Would you like more superhero type mutations? Are you happy with the Darwin's World version of most mutations, where they're very harsh? Where do you like the slider on that scale when it comes to realistic to unrealistic? Can you divorce yourself from the fact that the logic is completely inconsistent in Fury Road, and so you would have to have your logic completely inconsistent in an American version of Fury Road? Are you tolerant of that? I am probably an outlier in this, and I freely admit that I am probably an outlier. I really admit that I am a bit of a curmudgeon when it comes to stuff like this. I like internal consistency. I have been accused of liking it too much. So there you have it. But, I try. I like to get the conversation started, at least. You know, it could be worse. It could be raining nuclear fallout.